Hello and welcome to this edition of Beyond the Politics, a regular examination of the events happening right here in the Quinte region and the people who work so hard behind the scenes to make it all happen. I'm your host, Paul Martin. Joining me, and to adopt a popular slogan, Quinte West is the best place for guests. We have two guests from Sydney Ward, which is Ward 2, and Quinte West, Councillors Sharpe.
Great to be here, Paul.
Yes, and Councillor Shelley Stedall.
Thank you, Paul. Nice to be here. Thank you.
So first, and we're going to talk a little bit about how you both came to be in the seats you're now in today, but part of that discussion, of course, has to revolve around a sad event that happened earlier this year. Quinte West lost not just an advocate, not just a champion, not just a councillor, but someone who really worked tirelessly for the not as fortunate among us in Terry Cassidy. He passed away earlier this calendar year, which of course touched off, among other things, a grieving process that we're all still going through, but the actual process of filling that seat and then moving on with the business of council. A challenging thing at all times, but that actually took about the first 2 months of this calendar year. Now council is back to business. They passed a budget and we'll be talking about that. But again, our thoughts go out to Terry's family and everyone who worked with him. He was someone who is a big part of our community still, and he is dearly missed.
Yes, certainly is, Paul.
So, Karen,
Sure.
as someone who worked with him on the previous council,
Yes.
can you talk about your feelings about Terry?
I sure can. I had the pleasure of working with Terry off and on for 20 years. He was a councillor for 24 years, even starting out in Sydney Township before we amalgamated.
Yeah.
And Terry, as you know, was a strong advocate for environment, climate change, waste management. And I think he even started the recycling programs when they started many years ago, and he led that and championed it. But to your point, Paul, Terry really fought for and worked for the vulnerable persons. And he worked with Community Partners for Success. And he also worked for families and children that were vulnerable to make sure that we have the programs and continue to have the programs. Terry and I worked together for 8 years on Human and Social Services Committee, and Terry advocated strongly, for the child care programs and just family programs to make sure basic needs, food, housing, all of clothes. And so it was really a privilege, and I learned a lot from Terry. And the one thing about Terry too, he he respected and demonstrated kindness to everyone he worked with. Colleagues, residents, co-workers. He had such respect, and his style and his caring, it was just a real honor, and he is really missed. He's missed.
Shelley, you had the chance to work with him for the last few months on the current term. So what was that like?
It was Terry was a friend. He would come across as a friend, and very friendly, and a mentor, very passionate about everything that he did. I actually I met Terry back in 1998 when I first was working with the City of Quinte West, and even at that point in time when we first met, he was very enthusiastic, and he embraced new staff, and he just always as a councillor, when in my ward, he would get people involved, and he would do the trash bash, and he would do that type of started the recycling and the composting efforts and things like that, and that's how people remember a lot of that passion that he had. So when I came on council and started to actually work with him, it was phenomenal. He was very good. He would step in when I had questions about anything. He would mentor me. It was nice to have those conversations, and I honestly thought that we would be working together a lot longer, and his loss is huge for not just the city, but just for anybody's lives that he's touched, and we miss him.
No, thank you for both expressing those. I know it's not something that just happened, but the grieving process takes time. And for Quinte West as a whole, for everyone who's still grieving the loss of Terry Cassidy, we wish you the best. That, of course, also brings on the difficult decision of what to do with that seat, which is something that was just resolved over the course of the last just over a month. Now, of course, the typical process, which is laid out in the Municipal Act, is you have two options. You can hold a by-election to fill a vacant seat, and that's regardless of how early or late in the term it is, or you can appoint someone who is qualified to fill that seat, which is the same criteria they use on election day. You have to be a citizen within the area in question. You have to be willing to serve, and there's other things. But basically, if you're eligible to vote and you're eligible to run, then you're eligible to put in that seat, and beyond that it says nothing. So at some point, council had to make that decision. And typically, what's happened and what happened in Belleville was the discussion was between next person in line, which is, say, the next highest vote getter, or hold a by-election. When that decision came to Quinte West decided to go a different way and appoint Karen to that seat. Karen, of course, you ran for mayor.
Yes, I did.
And finished second to Jim Harrison in the recent municipal election. We'll talk about the election itself soon as well. So that sort of presented another option that was available. So Shelley, as one person who was on council and the person who made that motion on that day, can you talk about what the thinking was going into it and how we got to where we are today?
So, if you don't mind, I'm just going to back up just a little bit,
Sure.
because there was another motion that was put on the floor, and the first motion that was put on the floor was by Councillor Quinte, and that was to have a by-election.
Yes.
And that was, I supported his motion, and the two of us were the only ones that actually supported it at the end of the day. We had, we're in the middle of getting ready for the budget, and the staff brought back a report saying it was going to be about $100,000 for the cost, and so the rest of council decided that that was too much to bear at that point in time. But I think, I still feel that it's important that the democratic process should have been followed. I still strongly support that a by-election would have probably been the most transparent. However, when it came forward, then there was a name that was put on the floor. The name didn't move forward, and then there was the opportunity for a second name. We put forward Karen's name, and it was 8 of 12, 8 to 4. Yeah. So it went forward, and I'm very pleased to be able to work with Karen at this point in time. I think that Karen brings a lot of experience, and not just as previously a staff person, but also as a councillor for the past 8 years. And all of her background that she has, I think, is something that we need at the city. And so I'm very pleased to be able to move forward with that. And anyway,
What kind of reaction did you get? Because, I mean, that wasn't something that was necessarily anticipated. It's fully within the rights of council to do that, and certainly, of course, Karen is very qualified to fill that role, having done it for 8 years. But what kind of response did you get?
Oh, there was a lot of response in the media about alternatives that should have been taken and ways we should have done it. I guess what I feel is that you need to be in the moment. You need to be able to pivot. Okay, that's a word we keep hearing about. And change, I think, is something we have to take a look at. You need to be able to make decisions in the moment as what's most appropriate. And to change improves us. To do things the way we've always done, I think, doesn't make us better. We have to have learned, and if COVID has taught us anything, we do have to make some changes, and we have to think of the whole situation. So I know people were not very happy, and I'm sure that we may hear about this in years to come. But I think at the end of the day, people are going to find that the candidate that was selected was the best for Quinte West, and I'm not going to worry about what people had to say at that point in time. We're going to move forward.
Everything about putting council together. But then, of course, almost immediately after that happens, the budget's happening. And it was a big, and in some ways a different budget process this year. So of the local councils, Quinte West chose to go in a different direction. I'll summarize briefly, which is instead of doing a single-year budget, it was presented as a combined operating and capital 4-year budget approach, which initially produced an average increase, initial report only, of 8%, 10% scaling down to average 8% over the 4 years. And then later came down and came into, I believe it was 5.6, 5.3. 5.3. So a lot of things happened during that process. So Shelley, in the process of putting the budget together, and for your very first budget, all of a sudden it's going to be radically different from the way the budgets were before. How did you feel about the process? And did this take you by surprise? Did you like the approach? How did you feel about it?
Okay, so let me start with just, it's my first budget as a councillor for the city of Quinte West. It is my 30-plus budget in municipal.
There you go.
government. So I have a fair amount of experience as to how these things pull together. So let's talk about, it was put on the floor that we're having a 4-year budget that with these percentages that were extremely high. And the first discussion that I had with different people was they thought that it was 8%, so it's going to be 2% each year.
Yes, I heard that too.
Yeah, so there was a lot of miscommunication about, or not miscommunication, but not understanding.
Sure.
I shouldn't say miscommunication because staff does an excellent job in communicating things out. It's just that the people have their perceptions, how they like to see things done. My feeling was that, based on experience, is that with a new council, so the budget's late in the process. Whenever there's an election year, the budget is always late. It's always put out a couple of months beyond when you want to have it in place, because you'd like to really have a budget in place in December to go forward into January. This, because of the election, was late. And then we were hit with a 4-year, which I agree with the multi-year budget, because pre-planning is very, very important. But for the new council that is just coming together and getting to know each other, which I just talked about earlier, we're just getting to know each other, to plan and to pass a budget that was going to be for 4 years, and this included the capital projects and some very major capital items that are in that, I felt was premature. So I wasn't happy with the process. And I voiced that a few times on council, is that I do feel that there needs to be more discussion with council. We need to have, and I'm hoping that we'll go forward and we'll have some one full day discussions like they have in other councils, is that we actually take a budget day and we talk about the operations and we talk about the capital budget and we figure out exactly what it is that needs to be done in the next 4 years before we start to do a budget that is passed for 4 years. So my feeling is that when we came back with this, I put a motion on the floor for staff to come back and show us what a 3% is.
Yes.
I think it's really important that we make sure that our taxes and our utilities, the water and sewer as well, are affordable in the city, because we have, and I don't want to delve too much off topic to get into, there's a housing situation, but we want to keep our residents in their homes. And so we want to have a tax rate that's going to be reasonable, that they're going to be able to afford, and not huge increases. So that's why I asked them to come back with a 3%. Tell us what that looks like. Tell us the projects or the services would have to be cut back in order to be at 3%. And staff did that. And they came back with information not just on how the operations run, but also what would have to be cut, because the first cut was from a 4% increase in capital to back to 2% is what we ended up with. But in previous years, it's always a 1% capital. So the process to me was spotty. It wasn't as laid out as well as I think that we should be going forward. And it was difficult because there were new people sitting at the table.
Sure. What would the message be that you would give to the citizens of Quinte West about things moving forward? I'll start with you, Karen.
Well, thank you, Paul. They're going to be positive moving forward. We're here to work together with the residents and the council. I'm very excited about the future. It's our 25th anniversary and we're celebrating 25 years of Quinte West. And I know we're going to be quick here, but I started working with Shelley just after amalgamation in 1998, and we've seen so much growth, and it's positive moving forward. Excited.
Yeah, I think this council is on task, and we want to see the growth be, very positive. And I think that we've really got a great team together, and I just want to see lots of. And I'm interested. This 25th anniversary is so exciting. It really is for the city.
Well, thank you both for giving us this in-depth view into Quinte West. This is Beyond the Politics.